Hello everyone and welcome to Akron Buzz. Our guest in the studio, Tim Carroll, a product of the Akron Public Schools and a local author, soon to be a national author.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming in and share with us the story of your book, World War II Akron. How did this come about?
Well, my grandfather left behind hundreds of World War II letters, so I worked putting them in order. And once I did, I read his first one, and he signed it 364 more days. And that's when I realized that he was drafted March 1st, 1941. And we didn't know I didn't know there was a draft before Pearl Harbor, where there was 1 million men drafted before, because France had lost to Germany. America was concerned they were going to have to get involved. So that really sparked my interest. I started writing about that. And my publisher liked the book I wrote about my grandfather, but since he wasn't famous, they weren't sure they wanted to publish it. So they had done a World War II Cleveland, World War II Detroit, so I said, you liked what I did, could I write World War II Akron? And they said, yeah, we'll give you a contract to do it since we did like what you did. I think they felt bad turning it down because they thought it was good. It was just kind of a lame excuse. He's not famous, we're not sure if it will fly off the shelves. So I was lucky to get the contract, and as you can imagine, I was very excited and spent 7 days a week doing research, finding not only great material for the book in terms of writing and research, but also some great photos.
So you graduated from Firestone High School. You went on to the University of Akron.
Correct.
You taught, your degree is in history and in education.
Yeah.
You taught in the Akron Public Schools, and then what inspired you to decide, I want to go down this path of writing and publishing a book?
As you said, I had a history degree, so I really wanted to put it to use. I thought my grandfather's World War II letters would have been a good opportunity, because I had those letters, and I thought, well, if there's something in there, it'd be interesting to write about, if there was something historical in there. And there was. Like I said, the book, I called it 364 More Days, because to me it was kind of crazy how being drafted March 1st, 1941, before Pearl Harbor, he expected to come home in 1 year, and they were supposed to be in the reserves after that. And all the way up till Pearl Harbor, these guys expected to go home. And then after Pearl Harbor, a lot of them get sent overseas 30 to 45 straight months. He got sent overseas 33 straight months, and my other grandfather 36 straight months. They're lucky to actually have come home, because there were men from Akron who were sent overseas 35, 40 straight months, and unfortunately were killed after serving that long overseas. Which was kind of pretty crazy, because a lot of the area families were writing the government saying, can you start sending some of these guys home? How much do they have to give? Because there really was no rule of thumb. They really, serving that much was enough, but they had trouble finding replacements to rotate all these men home. The government typically had the same answer. We can't send entire units home. We got to send replacements, and it's going to be a slow rotation. So some of these men would get killed in action after 36, 37 straight months overseas.
Wow. Did you find Akron's role in World War II in these letters? How did you decide that you were going to write about Akron's role in World War II?
Well, the main thing that got me interested in that was there was some information on Akron, of course, in the letters, which was pretty cool. But the main thing that got me interested in that is I wanted to write a book, and since they kind of turned down my grandfather's World War II book because he wasn't famous, they had done a World War II Cleveland, World War II Detroit, so I just said, could I write World War II Akron, knowing that there was probably some cool history there, but I wasn't, I hadn't done any research, which was kind of cool. They gave me the contract without having written a word or done any research. So it was really a break for me, and it was a lot of fun doing that research and trying to find awesome stuff for the book.
Certainly, Akron's manufacturing capacity in that era played a huge role in World War II. How much of that is contained in the book?
There's a lot in the book. You can even see on the cover the Goodyear blimps on there, which is pretty crazy. I didn't know before I did the research that in World War I and World War II, the blimps served in the Navy hunting subs, and they were great protection for subs. They could hover up with water, they could see deep, and the subs really couldn't sink ships, because if they came to the surface to fire, the blimps could alert nearby planes and ships, and they would be attacked immediately. So the blimps were great protection. Goodyear made all of those, and Akron was actually bigger than Columbus back then, if you can imagine. It was the second largest industrial area in Ohio, behind Cleveland, and 12th in the nation. Obviously, with being the rubber capital of the world, tires were the tire production was immense. The Japanese cut us off from 97% of our rubber with the attack on Pearl Harbor, so the rubber industry had to be creative. They started planting rubber in South America. Synthetic rubber became big, scrap drives. Firestone Tire and Rubber made 80% of the anti-aircraft guns for the Allies combined, if you can imagine that. So and they were used on ships, they were used on land, you name it. They took these things from Firestone and Akron, sent them up to Lake Erie, where they fired them off over the lake to test them, and then they went off to overseas service, which was pretty cool. Another fun fact I got in there is the guy named J. Frank Good is the man who invented the life raft, which I found pretty interesting because you can read a lot of stories in World War II of men surviving 80-some days on a life raft, or the guys in Unbroken, they survived, if you've seen that movie or read the book, they survived 47 straight days on a life raft. So a lot of these guys that had to spend 2 to 3 weeks or more on a life raft, that was actually invented in Akron, and all the rubber companies made life rafts because they needed so many, even though J. Frank Good was a Goodyear man.
Sure.
So his invention was key. Goodyear aircraft started during World War II, and then they later actually, it's the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, they were involved later in the space race. But they started making a lot of parts for planes, and they did make the Corsair fighter plane, was the only complete plane they made. But they actually got into it by accident to some extent. They were making tires for planes, and back then nobody really used planes; they used cars. So all the brake manufacturers said, "We're not going to make brakes for these tires." So Goodyear Aircraft started making their own brakes for planes.
Sure.
And once the war broke out, they had to make a ton of brakes for planes, and then they made a ton of other parts like fuselages. Goodrich made the de-icers for the wings of planes. And another fun fact, you always hear the name Rosie the Riveter. B.F. Goodrich had a pretty interesting invention called a riv nut, which they used to put the de-icers that they made on the planes. They riveted them in. And plane manufacturers found these riv nuts to be so the fastest way to put together planes. They started using thousands of them to put together the entire plane. So that's where you get the name Rosie the Riveter. They're actually riveting a riv nut that was invented here in Akron by B.F. Goodrich. So
that's fascinating. And how do you deal with the copyright use of the pictures? Are they in the public domain? You're doing all this research.
Sure.
You must have encountered thousands of images. You would have liked it. It's not a picture book, but you know.
Yeah, most pictures from that era aren't in the public domain unless they're from the National Archives. The government pictures are in the public domain.
And how do you go through the process of saying, I would like to use this in our book here?
Well, so I have a lot of photos from the Akron Beacon Journal, so I just went there for weeks doing research, finding a lot of interesting photos, and I had to pay them. I've paid over $1,000 for the photos in the book. So if you get the book, you're going to get your money's worth. But yeah, if you're going to...
the pictures alone, sure.
Yeah, the pictures alone are great. There's a lot of rare photos. Like I said, it was pretty cool to find a lot of this stuff. The cartoonist from the Beacon Journal was really good. I'm hoping that's going to be my next book. I'm working on a deal right now I'm hopefully going to get called The Best Cartoons of World War II, because what I found is he was actually the best in the country during the time period, making cartoons for Akron Beacon Journal. He's got a cool story as he came back from the Spanish and American War, and for 46 years he made cartoons, retiring at the end of 1945. So he's really at the top of his game, and even in the early 1900s, he was one of the best cartoonists. And his name's Webb Brown, and he was really a very interesting fellow. He lived to age 98 and died in 1974. So,
where can our viewers, anyone watching, find your book? You mentioned it's at Stan Hewitt, or maybe it's at other locations.
Yeah, they can find it at any Barnes & Nobles or Books A Million. Acme's carrying it, San Juan Pharmacy, a lot of the independent bookstores like the Learned et al. And the Snowball Bookshop in Barberton. And you can get it online as well, anywhere online like Amazon, BarnesandNoble.com, anywhere you can think of. And I think Prime Day just entered. It was $5 off for the Prime Day celebration, but yeah, you can get it anywhere, and it's selling pretty well.
What advice do you have for anyone else that might want to take on a project like this? You have a lot of time and a lot of research, and you were inspired to do this. So if somebody's inspired to say, I have an idea for what is the process of working with the publisher or getting it? You've taken it all the way to this point.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing in the world to get a book deal. I was kind of fortunate. My publisher specializes in local regional publishing, so that's why they want to, it's a World War II Akron. They specialize in, they're probably not going to put out a World War II America book. So you could, if you want to write about local history, they're actually really good, and you might be able, if you're a good writer and you can research, you can probably, their process is also fairly easy, and they're called the History Press, and they also have a branch called Arcadia where they publish picture books. So if anybody wanted to write books for them about local history, they're great to work with. And then there's a ton of other publishing companies out there, and then you just usually have to submit paperwork, kind of like you're applying for a college application. So it's not the funnest thing, but once you get that book deal, the research is a lot of fun. To me, that was the funnest part, is finding cool information for the book. I did enjoy writing it, but sometimes writing can be tough, putting it all together. Finding that cool information for the book, finding those cool pictures was probably the funnest thing for me.
Well, thanks for coming on and sharing it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Tim Carroll has been our guest, and certainly the information about where to find the books here. And appreciate you coming on, appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next one. That's great. That's very good. Yeah, and to be